The question prompt, again, is at the top. Using the documents in your knowledge of world history, evaluate the responses to the spread of Buddhism in China, starting from the 1st century CE. As Buddhism spread from India to China by merchants along the Silk routes, beginning in the 1st century CE, it was either received by the Chinese as a new religion and practice, tolerated, or rejected. That there is a thesis. That is an answer to the question. That answers the prompt. Now these, a few Chinese accepted Buddhism and defended its policies, while others scrutinized Buddhism's absence from past texts and used it as a scapegoat for political and social problems. Still, others remained inclusionary in their approach in order to tolerate a belief system that was different from their own. And again, I'm just going to extend this thesis down because that's what that does. The little line about Buddhism is spread from India to China by the Silk routes is not enough for contextualization. So we're just going to keep that in the thesis. That's all an answer to the prompt. That's all you have to do with your thesis is answer the prompt. So they set up their 3 groups with that. This right here, the Chinese had positive responses to the spread of Buddhisms, docs 2 and 5. That right here is a topic sentence. When you use topic sentences, you're building your argument. So all I did here is take positive responses, right, received by the Chinese as a new religion and practice. That's where that came from. And now we're going to build an argument under that topic sentences. We're going to use docs 2 and 5 to build that argument. The research component from this is that you've got your 7 documents that were researched for you, and now you're using 2 and 5 to make and build your argument to support that claim that you've made in your thesis. Does everybody see it? So, Zidun must be a Chinese Buddhist, or he studied the religion at its highest level. He is seeking comfort in Buddhist ways during tumultuous times of the Warring States period, and is speaking from a standpoint of someone who is peace in the chaos. He's addressing the aristocrats of the fallen Han court, telling them to turn away from evil things of the world that causes suffering and turn to serve the Buddha. Yet in a time when the Asian steppe nomads were invading North China, Zidun could have easily targeted Buddhism as a mean of foreign corruption, but he does not. So like this, where he is addressing the aristocrats, and that he must be a Chinese Buddhist because he is speaking from the standpoint of someone with peace, that's your source from Doc 2. So put an S2 there. But all of this is evidence from Doc 2, and that this right here, where he kind of does a support of argument, that's going to be EVA of Doc 2. So right there, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do this. At the beginning of all of these, I want you to do this at the top of your paper. So we've labeled all 7 documents at the top of our paper. When we do EV, we go like that. When we go EVA, we go like that. And when we do a sourcing, we put a little S under it. So right now, we've used and supported Doc 2 in our argument, and we use sourcing from it. We told who the audience is and like the purpose of the guy speaking. Yes? Good. Instead, he links the suffering he and the court feel to the suffering found in the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha's first sermon. The intent of the Buddha in his original sermon was to give hope in a time of suffering. The Buddha was empathetic and understood pain because he was living in hard times as well as those around him. He wanted to set people who were suffering free from that suffering in hopes that they would reach oneness with the world spirit. In order for this freedom from suffering to happen, they would have to follow the Eightfold Path. The right speech, right action, right meditation would help the Buddhists feel at peace in times of chaos. People, that's Doc 1. Why didn't I use Doc 1 up here?
It's not like directly support.
Because it doesn't directly support the argument of how China received Buddhism, right? Remember, they're going to put in a document that looks like it doesn't go, because that isn't used to answer the question, the prompt. But it's supporting your evidence in that people accepted these principles, which are stated in Doc 1. So this right here is evidence and then EVA of Doc 1. So we're going to mark it like that. And then, look, this right here, eightfold path with the right speech, right action, meditation, that right there is your EBD. What is EBD? Evidence beyond the document. Thank you. So they supported it, they used it as evidence, and then they add a little EBD. Yes, sir?
What's the difference between EVA, EBD, and then EBD and contextualization?
So the question was, what's the difference between EBD and like the support evidence that we're giving with EVA and contextualization? Well, right now we haven't seen contextualization. Like, we haven't seen a story around something. You're going to see it on the backside. But you haven't seen it yet. So EBD has to be a specific piece of information that supports your argument that's not in the documents. So the fact that the kid knew what an eightfold path was, with the right speech, right, all that, that's evidence beyond the documents that supports that idea of oneness with the world spirit. So nirvana's in the documents. So nirvana, if they would have used the word nirvana there, they wouldn't have gotten the EBD. But because they use the eightfold path part that goes along with the four noble truths from Doc 1, that's why they get the EBD there. Contextualization we'll talk about. There's actually a handout in your notebook that shows the difference between it. So just check those out. We'll make that more clear as we go along. The more you see, the more it will become clear. Okay. First time, it's as clear as mud right now, people. I get it. I'm just trying to show you expectations so that we can start making steps towards this. Alright, as a response to the attacks on Buddhism, Zhongmi, a Buddhist scholar, makes a case to the Tang Emperor that Buddhism is not a threat to the order or stability of his government. This scholar explains to the emperor's wives and concubines that all teachers, Buddha included, with the beloved Confucius and Lao Tse, taught that good must prevail over evil in society. He may only hold that view because he was a Buddhist and was protecting his religion and way of life, but he was trying to persuade the wives and concubines to influence the emperor and not ban the religion. So, as a response to the attacks on Buddhism, so this Buddhism makes a case that Buddhism is not a threat, so that's EV of Doc 5. This scholar explains to the wives and concubines that all teachers, right? So that's his audience. But then he goes on to say that he may only hold that view because he was protecting that. So that's sourcing of 5, and that, our sourcing includes like purpose. He's persuading the wives not to ban. So EVA of 5 also. So we go back up at the top, and so we mark 5 and S5 at the top. Questions right now? Do we see how all 3 of those documents supported the topic sentence from your thesis? Yes, ma'am. So EVA is that you've actually used the evidence to support your argument, to support that topic sentence. So usually, if you're addressing sourcing, you automatically get the EV part, like you're using the document, right? Because you're talking about the source of the document. But when you talk about how that source is trying to influence or, his purpose for that, you're analyzing that document to support your argument. Do you see the difference? Like, just use is that you've addressed it. You're talking about the source and, what he's doing. Or you're talking about something from the document. EVA is that you're specifically making that evidence work for your argument. Maybe? It will become clearer as we go on. So let's look. China rejected the doctrine of Buddhism during times of instability or shifts toward xenophobia were observed. So that's another topic sentence. We're going to mark that as a topic sentence. People, that is scrutinized Buddhist absence from past tense at the top to come down here to your argument. So I just marked, like the scrutinized part to bring it down because that's your argument. You're building from your thesis statement into your topic sentences, and now we know you're going to use docs 4 and 6 to support that argument. Does everybody see it? Okay. So Han Yu was an advisor in the Tang court, and his opinion is clearly anti-Buddhist. So right there, that's EV. EV of 4. Right? Because that's what the document's about. Does everybody see that? It's just basic. There's no supporting of your argument there. It's just saying what the doc is. He was a leading Confucian scholar and condemns Buddhism as foreign with potential to destabilize the government if allowed to continue to lie to the masses of Buddhist Chinese people. Han Yu is speaking to the emperor, so like this is your start of your sourcing because that's audience, and his court of advisors claiming that Buddhism threatens the filial piety and social fabric set up by Confucius. Now that is EVA of 4. That is, I'm using that information from that document to support my argument. This warning comes when the relic bone of the Buddha is allowed to be admitted to the palace. Han Yu is disgusted by this act and pleads with the emperor to destroy the relic and purify China for things that were just Chinese things. A very xenophobic response. So he's disgusted and he pleads, and that's sourcing for 4. So audience and tone right there get our sourcing point for Doc 4. Stay with me, people. Thank you. The emperor either was influenced by Han Yu or a new emperor held the position 30 years later when he issued a decree that banned Buddhism from China. Emperor Wu abolished Buddhism because it was foreign and the cause for numerous problems within Chinese society. So there's your EV6. Since the author of the edict was the emperor himself, it is likely that his decree was law and there are not too many Chinese that would break Confucian values by continuing to practice an abolished religion. So I think that's sourcing of 6, and because we have like sourcing of 6, that's EV of A of 6. It's an argument. They're supporting the argument. So they're using the evidence to support that topic sentence at the here where China rejected the doctrine of Buddhism. So just from that, we had 4, and we had sourcing from 4, and then we had 6, and we had sourcing from 6. Everybody's good right now? So we haven't used 3 or 7. This next part right here, you've got to follow the argument, right? So there, that last paragraph was arguing that it was a very xenophobic response, right? So this right here says, this xenophobic response will resurface in China when the Yuan dynasty falls to the Ming. Once the Mongols were disposed as the leaders of China, the Ming's junk ships led by Zheng He went out into the Indian Ocean with treasures to show off how great China was and how great the honor was for these societies. This next sentence is kind of like a wormhole that the kid goes down, like wants to talk about Zheng He even though this DBQ has nothing to do with Zheng He. These were not exploration or colonization voyages, rather they were in fact to flaunt the wealth of the Chinese. When Yongle died, the Ming's new emperor forbade the ships from continuing their exploits and burned the ships, in essence closing the door to China to all things not Chinese. Just as Buddhism will be rejected because of its lack of Chineseness, so too will Western influence from Portugal, the Dutch, and English until the Chinese are forced to open back up after the Opium Wars with specific spheres of influence by the aforementioned Western nation.
Yes.
So think about this right now. They used the word xenophobia, and they went, there are other times in history when xenophobia has been around, when this has happened. And I want to talk about Zheng He, so let me talk about when xenophobia happened after Zheng He. So they tied the argument of Buddhism being rejected because of xenophobia to a context far, far away kind of thing, right? Context doesn't have to be like the immediate setting around something. It can be a setting around an idea or a process within history. So the xenophobia is a process in history. Does everybody hear that? So that idea, and just know that this is complex process. Like this is a complex idea. Not all of you are going to be able to do it like this. You're going to be able to set the stage. You would say something more in that topic sentence at the beginning where it says Buddhism spread from India to China by merchants along the Silk routes, and you would talk about how those merchants brought Buddhism into China and spread through merchant communities of like diasporic merchant family communities along these Silk routes. That could be a contextualization, and you could get the contextualization point. This kid thought, okay, xenophobia, it's a process. I know contextually when it happened again. But it adds to their argument, and therefore, not only do they get the the contextualization point, but because this argument is kind of woven through the whole essay, they get the complexity point too. So, the topic sentences and this like idea that it's threaded all the way through the argument gets that to the complexity too, but not just for a paragraph. Like complexity is the whole thing with the topic sentences and the argument being like from your thesis and carrying that argument all the way through. Complexity is not something that I will expect from you until May. So don't be intimidated by that. But we want to strive to write to that and carry that argument all the way through. That's the goal, is to be able to get that complexity point. Expectation's not there, but we're going to strive to write with an argument all the way through our essay, just like historians. So we're going to mark this then as context, because that's what this is context throughout our idea of xenophobia, and it supports our argument. The final response to the Chinese was to have an inclusionary toleration of Buddhism. Again, directly from our thesis, it's a topic sentence, and they're going to use the documents 3, 5, and 7. Now we've already covered 5. We've already talked about it. So I always want you to use one document twice, always. Because it shows the greater that you have analyzation skills that go beyond just putting things into one group, that you can see that parts of it can be argued within other groups. So that adds to the complexity point here. So let's see. In the disposition of error in China around 500, unknown authors write in Confucian style addressing concerns by the people who are challenging Buddhism. He shows knowledge of both Confucius and Buddhist philosophies. He counters the scrutiny of anti-Buddhists with logic. So this right here is just EV of 3. He doesn't think that Buddhism is destabilizing force in China. He feels it's just different. Author could be Buddhist because of the way he's answering. He answers those who are questioning Buddhist role in society. Okay, so this is EV EVA of 3. I'm not sure 3 has strong sourcing. Like that's not really strong sourcing there. So even though it says the author could be Buddhist, we really can't give that sourcing with that. It's okay. We don't need it. We've got others. Another Buddhist scholar tries to convince the wives and concubines of the emperor to persuade the emperor not to see Buddhism as a threat to the kingdom. As a Buddhist, so like we kind of heard that in the one above it, right? Like in the argument above it for 5. But here's where it gets different. As a Buddhist, he would want to convince the emperor to allow Buddhism to continue to be practiced and supported in the palace because he is there and doesn't want to be killed or relocated if Buddhism is banished. Unfortunately, we don't know if he was successful in his plight because after Emperor Wu's edict, all Buddhism was eradicated from the emperor. So this right here, we already have EV and EVA for 5. We already have it. So we really, that's just more evidence and more evidence of analysis there.
We like sourcing.
And we already have sourcing for 5. We already have sourcing for 5. So he already earned that. It's just kind of a reiteration, but it's in a different path. It's a different analyzation point. So it's kind of showing that there's complexity here because we're using it more than once. The statue of the Chinese goddess of mercy, however, crafted after Emperor Wu's edict, proves Buddhism did not completely clear from China when directed. So there's EV of 7. This sculpture portrays a calm, peaceful figure that could be mistaken as a Buddha if the nameplate who was on it went missing. That's just EVA of 7. Like they're using it in analysis of it is that it's inclusionary, it's kind of Chinese, but it's kind of Buddhist. It's, a mixture of both kind of thing. So this last part, Buddhism was accepted in China and practiced along the way with Confucian ideas during the Sui and Tang dynasties. However, Buddhism wasn't accepted by all Chinese and will eventually be pushed out and blamed as part of the fall of the Tang dynasty. It's just a reiteration of your thesis statement. Shows 2 groups there. Answers the question again, just in case you forgot. So, did we have a thesis point? Okay, did we have contextualization point? Okay, did we have evidence points? Did we use all of the documents? Yes? Did we get our analysis point for EVA? We analyzed all the documents. Yes. You have to analyze 6 or 7 to get that point. So we want to, it's a deployment, it's a, you put the evidence to work for your claim, to work for your argument. We did that. Did we get sourcing? Did we have 4 of them? Yeah. Oh, it's cut off. I'm so sorry. Yes, it's cut off. It's sourcing, yes, we got 4 of them. People, you only have to do 3 of them according to the rubric on the front of your DBQ. In my class, you have to do 4 in case one of them was not enough. Everybody hears me? You have to do 4. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did we have, what's our last, EBD.
Yes.
Our 8-fold path is our EBD. And then that is a 6 out of 7. Did it have complexity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Everybody's just one side.
It's okay. It's kind of a unicorn point. It's what we strive for. But that argument build all the way through it gets at that complexity point. It's a perfect 7 out of 7. It's not conventional because that contextualization was in a weird place.
That was beautiful.
Okay, I'm glad. All right, I'm going to stop this.